Well, good morning. If I told you some tough technical difficulties we encountered here, you'd laugh. And I don't feel like being Benny Hill. I don't feel like being Richard Pryor, of which I'm neither. But anyway, on this Saturday, November 22nd, welcome to the new and improved U.S. Africa relation. My name is Gustavo Vela, coming to you from an undisclosed location, which will be disclosed in the near future. But I want to first of all wish President Trump, his wife Melania, his son Barron, all of his children the very best weekend. I know that at the Oval Office today, Mr. Mondani and Mr. Trump exhibited class, poise, distinction, a mutual love of the city of New York, the Big Apple. I have a family that lives there, and as back in the day, my father was a UN ambassador. We lived at 57 Magnolia Avenue back in the day. There's a gentleman by the name of Davidson Nicola, apparently, because remember, I was born on, first of all, let's start from the top. I was born on January 26, 1968, in Bata, Rio Muni. Juan Velasco was the physician, Spanish physician. Bata also, I was told by one of my older brothers that I had a lot of hair. A lot of hair. Well, 57 years later, I've chosen not to have a lot of hair. My father was appointed ambassador after having attended. We'll go back in time. Dad was selected when he was a student at a college, a seminary school in Cameroon by some missionaries, William Ainley, and some among others. He was selected to go to Lincoln University, an HBCU, and he had great teachers. He missed Kwame Nkrumah by a couple of years, but he is a legacy. And essentially, Lincoln University served as a haven for African students that many Americans, white people in the intelligence community, like John and Alan Dulles, the whole State Department, CIA, Compo brothers. And so when they found my dad, they were happy. So dad's there, had a great life, met a lot of people. And so if you Google Gustavo and Bella, Lincoln University is my father. But during that time, my father, unfortunately, his first wife died of an aneurysm. Was out there. So he felt tremendous guilt. Bill Ainley and Nancy Ainley were the ones who cleaned up her body. Did it, but that triggered a series of events which began his fondness for libations. Came back, taught English to all the folks. My dad also spoke 6 languages. He taught himself English, Spanish, which was the native tongue, but he also translated, I think, the book of Paul. My brother is a Nengi Abu Jadi. He wrote a book called Ndoa Tales. And my dad worked with Jan Encina over at the University of Madison, Wisconsin. I think it was in 1982. Jan Encina was the person who helped discover Roots. Now, wouldn't it be interesting that when Roots first came out, 1977, my brother Nengi Abu Jadi began to trace the lineage of our family. And I remember him it's at 3113 Hamel Street. After, of course, when people like Tony Coulter, I remember my brother Manuel saying that when he saw Roots the first time, and then 1971 came out, the guy said, "Man, I want to kill me a whole lot of black people." And of course, Salem, Oregon, which probably had about 3 blacks at that time. But it just shows you the power of words and the power of vision. So, to make a long story short, my brother began a journey, the quest, to understand more about our family. And from what I've been told, our bloodline goes back to the Queen of Sheba. Our bloodline goes back to King Uganda, among others. My grandfather was a German Jew, left Germany for Gabon, named Samuel Wonker. He met my grandmother, gave birth to my mother. My mother was born on Crisco Island, and the rest is history. We wound up in Oregon in 1969. Actually, we wound up my dad's ambassador from 69 to 70. You know what he did? He actually took Macias, the crazy Macias. He took him to every single church because my father was respected. And my mother's family. Oh, the Beholies? The Beholies are no joke. Beholies. But Macias was kind of a wily guy. So we went, my dad vouched for him, the guy got elected, promised my dad that he was going to appoint an ambassador. Of course he didn't. Now remember, the Fang and the Ndowe there's a real tribalism, of which we're going to bring to an end. But, it was actually the Ndowe who helped liberate Equatorial Guinea. They were known as the intellectuals, Ndowe. And the Fang were much more brutal, the ones who stole the credit. And if you look at, there's a picture, which I'll try to include, of my father when they lowered the Spanish Guinea flag, because Equatorial Guinea was known as Spanish Guinea until October 12th, 1968, and raised the Equatorial Guinean flag. It was my father who gave the country's first national prayer. Imagine that. So in many ways, our family, we're kind of the George Washingtons and the Kennedys with all the problems that come with it. But when we landed in Salem, Oregon, I was about 2, so of course I don't have a whole lot of memory. But if it wasn't for the likes of Mark Hatfield, Senator Mark Hatfield, Congressman Bob Packwood, Congressman Edith Green, and Mr. Cooley, the First Presbyterian Church of Salem, Oregon, which to this day remains a source of spiritual support for our family. And so I'm saying this to say I began running at the age of 6 in my Winnie the Pooh slippers. Winnie the Pooh. And I won in the long jump, the 60-yard dash, and the 220-yard dash. And we through at Willamette University. Chuck Bowles was the coach back then. And, my first interview, I remember, was with Connie Whitaker. I'm going to try to go back in time here. Connie Whitaker with the Statesman Journal. And there's a guy named Rusty Hampton, and then Doug McLean, Brian Wong. I was very fortunate. And I'm gonna relate something to you that I haven't talked to a whole lot of folks. And like I said, it's a bit early, and we have some technical issues, but just remember that Satan's a liar, and we rebuke him and all of his minions. Know that. So when I was about 8 years old, I remember watching the Montreal Olympics, and Bruce Jenner, now Caitlyn Jenner, won the decathlon. So I told people, and at that point I'd been running for about 2 years, local meets. I said, one day I want to run the Olympics. People say, yeah, right. 4 Olympic Games later, and there's a story of how we got there. When I was like 13, my older brothers wanted to transfer from University of... Actually, I'm going to go back. When I was about 11, after having met a woman by the name of Dimitri Weathers, she was the track coach at Beverly Hills Track Club. I met her in Omaha, Nebraska, when I was... because I'd won national age group for, I think it was 9 and under, 10, 11. Anyway, it was Albuquerque, New Mexico was the first time I was beaten by a guy named OK Igu, who we believe was older than the average bear. And then I would go on to win, I think it's 1978 was Memphis, 1979 was Omaha, Nebraska, where I met Miss Weathers, 1980 Pleasant Hill, 1982, I can't remember, I think it was Omaha again. But to make a long story short, Miss Weathers, we lived in LA, and we lived in Oregon. She happened to be a coach who invented, and she actually started the Beverly Hills Track Club, and she was a wonderful woman. Among some of her former students was a guy named Jason Grode, who I think you know maybe from The Simpsons. So when I was, to go back in time, 6, I'm 8, tell people I want to win the Olympics. Yeah, right. I'm 11. After meeting Miss Weathers, I said, you know what? One day, I want to live in LA. And mind you, that was just a little kid doing his thing. But the power of God is real. When I was 13, my brother wanted to transfer to Stanford. Didn't get in. I fortunately was recruited by a number of schools. Chose Stanford. I didn't have a great athletic career in there, but I really came to terms with some of the trauma, transgenerational trauma that had incurred my family. But more importantly, I found an advocate in Dondre DeSantis and Brooks Johnson, with whom I wasn't able to develop a close relationship, and may he rest in peace. He recently passed. Andy Geiger was the athletic director at the time. When I was 28, and I saw what Tito Obiang Yamabasogo had been doing to our country, I said, one day, I'm going to become president of Equatorial Guinea. One day. Ended up living in LA, by the way. Graduated from Stanford in 1990. And let me tell you a little story about that. So, at the end of my junior year, started my senior year, a friend of mine drove down from Stanford to LA to see Miss Weathers. Because remember, I lived in Oregon. She lived in Beverly Hills, but we met in Omaha, Nebraska in 1979 with my father. I think had a little bit of crush on her. Dad was kind of a ladies' man. Or a womanizer. So we're talking. Oh, mind you, I didn't know anything about this woman other than we used to write postcards. I'm very prolific in writing thank yous. And she said, I want you to meet someone. So it turns out her granddaughter, whose name is, I'll keep it private. I met her, and 2 years later, we were married. So a woman who I met at the age of 11 in Omaha, Nebraska, and who would keep in contact with her family. Her granddaughter was meant to be my wife and who gave me 2 beautiful daughters with whom I'd do anything in the world for. And they know that. So that brings us to the question at hand. Donald Trump and I say it in a collective term, and I think the likes of Mr. David Urban, who's a good man, we're tired of African dictators. We're tired of each and every one of them. We're tired of the gamesmanship, the lying. Politics is full of that since the days of Julius Caesar to the present, so African politics is no different, but enough. Enough. I began my affiliation with the intelligence community in 1998. You know why? Because Obiang had been threatening to do harm to Madeleine Albright, the whole Rwanda thing. So, I made some contacts before I noticed at the Secret Service office in downtown LA. And for you, all you Secret Service agents out there who are annoyed by me thrusting paper or my emails, Rick Sears was my intro into your life. Rick Sears, LA. Remember that name, Rick Sears. We then go on to meet the likes of Ian McDonald, Mason Brayman, Daniel Fisher, Rick Searing, bunch of folks. Good, no better group of men on earth than men of the United States Secret Service, and I'm glad that President Trump found it to appoint a gentleman who saved his life in Butler. And it was a great tragedy, and it was something that a great and possibly Greek tragedy. And I'm sorry for the family of Charlie Kirk. He was a young man whose arc and trajectory was phenomenal, and I guess in many ways unparalleled. I don't worry about the race, that rhetoric. Remember, you guys have to realize that bad news sells. So who wants to hear about the birds flying, the birds chirping? Who wants to see me break dance? Because that would be bad news. That I would end up breaking my neck, and of course my daughters wouldn't even talk to me, even less. But all kidding aside, Teodoro Obiang Yambasogo, you're a liar. You continue to work with the Chinese. You hope to somehow follow the footsteps. You're a liar. You're a liar. Your uncle was a liar. You're a betrayer. And when you had well, you didn't, but when we fled our country, Matthias Nguema, who's a crazy guy, there's actually a book called The Dogs of War. The Dogs of War is written by Frederick Forsyth. Talks about Equatorial Guinea. There's a gentleman who was out there. His name is Richard Klitgard. He wrote a book called Tropical Gangsters. Richard Klitgard, and I want you to sue me. You embezzled $2 million when you were out there in Equatorial Guinea. When you wrote the book Tropical Gangsters, you used members of my family, their first names, to cash in, and you figured like many of these guys who are, academic mercenaries or Ivy League mercenaries. I just went to Stanford. You use the context in a vulnerable country that didn't have money, didn't have the access. They trusted you and you took their money. So wherever you are, I hope you continue to have a good life. It's funny because you know how nuances there are in life. Do you know that? So this is like the summer of '85. I just ran the Olympics in the '84 Olympics, and there's a guy who drove through to Salem, Oregon, into an area called Lancaster Mall, and he bumped into my girlfriend just randomly. Drove from Seattle down to Santa Monica. True story. The girl's name was Terry, and she said, "Hey man, you just got a tan. Where'd you come from?" She goes, "I just came back from Africa." My boyfriend's from Africa. She goes, "Yeah, I just came back from Equatorial Guinea." He just said he got back from Equatorial Guinea. She said, "My boyfriend is from Equatorial Guinea." So Richard Klitgard would then drive from Seattle to Salem, Oregon, to Santa Monica, where he would go on to work at the Rand Corporation, where Tomiko worked for years. And I don't think that the Rand Corporation, you did her wrong in her termination, and I had deep resentment for your mistreatment of her, and you can share that as the next president of Equatorial Guinea, and as the president of the Gulf of Guinea Foundation, and more importantly, the honorary chair of the United States of Africa. I'm going to remember that, what you did to her. So as we continue, we're demanding that the new Africa-U.S. partnership be one based upon mutual respect. China, you've got to go. Mr. Xi, you've got to go. Russia, you've got to go. You've got to go. You guys have used it. Wagner, Boriskovsky, all those guys. You guys are just, come on. Corruption, it runs about a lot of war profiteers. And you may, Dick Cheney, God rest his soul, I hope that he has merciful companies. I hope the company of his individuals on the other side are merciful in dealing with him. Good man, different time, different era. And once again, I want to emphasize that I stay out of the internal affairs of American politics. I'll comment, but my focus is on rebalancing and restructuring and transforming the African continent. And if we have to turn the continent upside down, having South Africa, in the northern part, and Egypt and all that, we'll do it. I support President Trump, and it stands with Kenya. Chief Gacha Buthelezi came to our home when I was he's head of the KwaZulu Nation when I was 6 years old. And this is going to be a lengthy thing, but perhaps there might be a story out there, from exile to the presidency, one man's quest to set the record straight. So, back to the issue at hand. That's a nice ring to it, doesn't it? It's kind of a rapping song. Back to the mission at hand. You're a liar, Teodorino. You're a thief. The $7.5 million you did for whatever. Who cares? You got to go. You've got to go. Because the angels have been dispatched. In your case, maybe the devils, but we know the devil's in the details. I want to take just as a sidestep, Stanford University is a great university. And, I went to Washington Elementary, Salem, Oregon, Walden Middle School, and Mr. Luke, rest your soul. I wish you could be there. Good man. And McKay High School, class of 1986. What I learned in Salem were the values of hard work, integrity, and being open to the possibilities of life. Dream big. Dream big, 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 big. And you can do it without compromising. There's some people who want a quick buck. Who cares? In the end, you can't take the millions with you. I know it sounds, you're going to be buried in your Mercedes? Okay, good luck. The 405, I'm sure on the other side of the curtain, is pretty cool when you're dead. So how do you do that? Because we're concerned with the living. I want to thank Salem, Oregon, teachers. Too many, but my mother and my father. My mother from Crisco, my father from Bolondo, my brother in Nenge, my sister Vicky, my brother Manuel, my brother Ted. Thank you, and I love you. There's so many talented people out there in the world, and I love Africa. I'm a permanent resident of the United States, thank God for Oregon, but a citizen of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea. And on this day, en este día, yo quiero preguntar a las personas de Guinea Ecuatorial, si tú quieres Gustavo Vela, hijo de Gustavo Vela y hijo de Victoria Vela, si tú quieres el próximo presidente con elecciones libres, por favor, permíteme para obtener tu voto. So if you want me to become the next president of Equatorial Guinea, we can do it through free, fair, and transparent elections. But I also want to make sure that Donald Trump and all the other individuals who want to help transform, this isn't about, takes, but we can be partners. Remember, when Marjorie Taylor Greene resigned, she talked about this and that toxicity. The virulent toxicity, the virulent corruption, the endemic tribalism, and more importantly, this need to somehow remain in power forever and ever. I'm not saying Mr. Trump should be for a third term, but think about these guys. Think about it. And there's different. Some of these guys have been around, like Mr. BF, 30, 40 years. Obiang's a long-serving president in history. And what have they done? Everything's gone retrograde motion. So I stay out of the internal affairs, but I'm asking you, I pledge to you, all you my American friends, that one day when I become president of Equatorial Guinea, I'll thank you. I'll thank all of my enemies, and I have many. But more importantly, I'm going to thank God. So with that, adios, Mareni, Mbolo, au revoir, and we'll see you soon from Equatorial Guinea.